In today's video of Path of Exile 2, I'm going to show you how you can make an achievable, cheap, but absolutely fantastic sorceress that destroys endgame maps and absolutely annihilates all the content. This thing can be created on a budget of between 1 to 5 divine orbs and is absolutely amazing. As you can see in the background, I'm using quite a juiced up tier 15 rare map with a boss on it, and this is what happens to the boss. The great thing about this build, this can be set up very early on and improved as you go, and like I said, it can be set up relatively cheap. Starting off at 1 divine, you'll be able to put pretty much everything in place, and then you'll be able to make it a little bit more powerful as you go, acquiring a few more pieces of gear and a certain jewel that can really help you out. In the background, I'll be showing all the tier 15 maps that I'm clearing, and what I like most about this is I've not gone pure damage, I've also made sure I've got quite a bit of survivability and crowd control going on as well. Right, so the first thing you're going to want to pick up is going to be a staff, and all the requirements for this: buy it cheap, 1 exalted orb or even less, and just make sure that it's got as high as you can equip of the skill Sigil of Power. This will help boost your damage whenever you're on tougher encounters and bosses. Also, make sure it's in your secondary slot and only attached to your secondary slot when you're using it, so that whenever you're using your other skills, they're all set as your primary and your first, and you'll switch between both of them, automatically weapon swapping. Over to probably the most important piece of the gear, and that's going to be your wand. With this, try to get this with as much damage as possible. I went for spell damage, high maximum mana, which you'll want on absolutely everything, as high intelligence as you can get, and as high level to all spells as possible. If you can get to +3, that's absolutely ideal, and it will still do pretty much exactly the same as you'll see in these videos, but if you can get anything above that, it will just go above and beyond. Also, if possible, you do not need this, but if you can, get a little bit of increased mana regeneration rate, and that will just help you to get back a little bit of mana overall. For your chest piece, and one prerequisite for this whole build, is that you get at least 60 spirit altogether combined across your piece of gear. If you can get 70 though, that works out even better. I've tried to aim for that as a cap. As with all your pieces of gear, you want to make sure you've got as high maximum energy shield as possible, then you want a little bit of spirit onto it. If you can get over 30 something, that should work out fine, and I'd say try to aim for 40 or so mark just in case. Then you'll want even more intelligence, and then try to round it off with as many resists as you can get. If you get some stun threshold in there, that can help, but a lot of times it's not actually needed, so if you want to get 2 resistances instead, that may well help you out later on with your rings. For the amulet, and I would say just try to get whatever you can with these. The market at the moment is saturated with absolute rubbish that people are trying to get way too much for. This one is far from ideal. It's got enough spirit to get us by, it's got +2 to level of spell skills, and those are the 2 ones you want to mainly make sure you focus on. Anything else you can get hold of with intelligence, maximum mana, and especially if you can get some critical chance or critical damage, will work absolutely amazing. But you may want to take your time with this. Try to snipe a nice one on the auction house, because people are charging way too much for these, and even paying 25 for this, I thought it was a little bit overpriced. But some of them they want about 70x for, and they're nowhere near as good as this. For your headpiece, same as before, everything you can chuck in to increase shield, make sure you've got that on. Then you'll want as high mana as possible, as high intelligence, and then round it off with very nice resistances. I tried to go well above 60 if possible, but again it will depend on the marketplace and how much you've got for exalted orbs to spend. Over to one of my top favourite uniques in the game, one of the very few ones that actually does something and is cheap and cheerful, and that's Kitiko's current jeweled gloves. These things are absolutely awful for stats and will make your build much worse for it. Everything else about them gives you complete survivability and will get you through the maps much faster, much easier, and overall I think this is one of the most integral pieces of gear in the kit. Reason for that is, even though it knocks down your cast speed, making your damage a little bit less, and doesn't give you any real great stats, your lightning damage from hits now basically means they're going to give them electrocute as well, which gives you a 5-second window of opportunity to absolutely massacre everything, because they're going to be kind of stunned and electrocuted for that duration. Do not overlook this item, you can pick it up for 1 exalted orb, just make sure you try to get the reduced cast speed as low as possible. For our boots, exactly the same again, you're going to want movement speed. I can only pick up 20, if you can get 25 that would be superb, but other than that, energy shield, maximum mana, intelligence, and any resistances you can grab hold of is definitely going to help you out. I like to have on the reduced freeze duration as well, just in a kind of bind, but we have got that on our charm, so don't worry too much if you just can't manage to find it. The focus is going to be another focus of attention, no pun intended. You'll want high energy shields on this, maximum mana as much as possible, and 2 level to your spell skills. After that, if you can get anything to do with crit, that'll work out perfect, and try to round it off with a little resistance, which will help out overall. Now, depending on your resistances, because you're using Kitiko's gloves, you may have not picked up quite as much as normal, so you probably need to pick up quite a bit with your rings. For that reason, I would recommend picking up something like the Sapphire or the Ruby, depending on what you're lacking, and stick with exactly what we've said before: high maximum mana, high intelligence, try and max out your resistances. If you can get any increased lightning damage or cast speed, that'd work out absolutely amazing. Lastly, for our little bits and pieces, for your flask, just make sure you pick up anything that's going to give you as high a mana back as possible, and make sure you pick up one that gives you back charges whenever you take out your enemies. Exactly the same for your charm, pick which one you decide. You can either go with a stun one, or you can go with one that will stop you getting frozen. I found overall the frozen one was best, but depending on your build, you may want to swap and change. Now over to the jewels, and it is going to be highly unlikely that you'll be able to get the exact same setup as me, because it's a budget build. That's not what you're going to be aiming for. What you want to do is make sure you have 2 in your setup that give you 2% mana back whenever you're defeating your enemies. That's going to be 4% overall. I found this to be ideal. If you can get some added damage with them, that would be perfect as well, but sometimes that boosts the price up a lot, so just go with whatever you can afford. Other than that, for the others, anything to really help your damage, and focus a little bit on crit chance or crit damage, with other ideal added ones being spell power, elemental damage, and if you can manage to find some for a reasonable price, shock magnitude also works out perfect. Again, hunt for the bargains, because people price these up ridiculously high when they're not worth it, and you can grab yourself some nice ones from anywhere between 2 all the way up to around about 20 exalts for ones that are really decent. Now, all of that combined pretty much comes to just under 1 divine, but you will obviously need to upgrade your armour using scraps as such, as well as your rings. And then if you want to boost your build even further, maximising it and making it have the most potential, then for just another few divine orbs, you're going to want to grab this right here. This jewel is just absolutely amazing, giving you a lot of extra mana, again helping with your damage and survivability. Against the darkness, time lost jewel is definitely something you want to aim for. When you're on a budget, make sure that it says small passive skills in radius also grant 1% increased maximum mana. If you've got a currency, notable passives, you'll probably want that to be with your intellect, but honestly this raises it massively, from around about 2 divines or 3 divines all the way up to around about 50 or even higher. So when you're on a budget like we are, just go with the passive skills, increase your maximum mana. Now at this point, these are our rough stats. Try and aim for a little bit more mana and intellect than I have, and you'll hit closer to that 5k mark with your mana, and that would be absolutely ideal. But we've got nearly 4.8k mana, all of our resistances are capped, our total mana recovery per second is 470, which is a little bit on the low side to be perfectly honest, but I haven't found it matters whatsoever at the moment, and all of our gear is exactly what we've got on that I showed you previously throughout the video. Honestly, this setup is absolutely ideal for a budget, and you can smash through pretty much everything with real relative ease, and it's just a lot of fun to play. Fast, destroys enemies quick, destroys bosses, and there's a whole bunch of room for improvement as well going forward. If you have a look at my gear, it has been qualitied, so it has upgraded a bit, but the only thing I've chucked in the sockets is going to be the iron runes, enhancing your overall energy shield a little bit. If you want it to be even stronger, then spend a little bit of additional currency and chuck in the soul cores that are going to give you 2% extra maximum mana on every single one. This will be absolutely amazing, and I'd imagine you'll get close to around about 5.3k mana, giving you even more survivability and a whole bunch more added damage. I should also mention, for your amulet, an amazing anointment that you can put on at a very reasonable price is going to be Coursing Energy. This is going to give you 40% increased electrocute build up, as well as 30% increased shock chance against electrocuted enemies. Absolutely ideal, helps with your damage when you're bringing down your lightning conduit, as well as building up your electrocute, keeping everything in place. This is only going to set you back about 10 exalted orbs, and I found it helps you to clear maps much faster. Jumping over to our skills, don't worry about the first one, that's whatever's on your wand. You're not going to be using this whatsoever, but you do need to make sure that you've picked up your Sigil of Power. This one, ultimately, you don't need to worry too much about anything else, just make sure you've got Sigil of Power in place for any time you want to boost your damage against the toughest foes or set yourself up against some really difficult bosses. Then you've got Conductivity. This is going to be absolutely amazing for knocking down their actual elemental defences, as well as giving you a boost to your shock damage. I found the best setup for this was to make sure I had Persistence on it, as this is going to give it even more skill duration. Then after that, supported skills have 40% more area effect, and lastly, make sure you've got Cursed Ground on it. Flame Wall I still use from time to time, but overall I don't tend to use this except for when I'm setting up against tough bosses, but Orb of Storms is something you'll be using constantly. This thing is absolutely ideal for taking on any elites, any bosses, anything that you want to just completely smash through, and also works great when there's packs of enemies around towards you. Make sure you've got Font of Mana on it in order to give yourself a little bit of extra mana regeneration. Then Lightning Exposure is an absolute necessary one, as this is really going to help you boost your overall damage. Lastly, give it strip away. Now when the enemies are exposed, it's also going to give it extra 30% increased effect. For our main damage dealer, we'll be using Spark obviously, as this thing is just ridiculously powerful. And like you see here, even if you didn't want to spend too much upgrading its sockets, just make sure you corrupt one in order to get 4 at its bare minimum. Then you're going to want Arcane Tempo, as this is going to give you 25% more cast speed. Considered casting just for that additional damage, because 40% is far too much just to leave out, and even though it does dwindle down your cast speed a little bit, you've picked it up in other places. Then Inspiration, you just can't live without this. Make sure you put this on, that's going to take 40% less cost of your actual spell. And finally, I found Overcharge to be absolutely amazing. 75% increased magnitude of shocks inflicted with supported skills. If I had that last socket, I'd probably put on Conduction, which would give you additional 100% more chance to shock, which will help again when you're trying to get your big hit off with your cast on shock move. Over to Archmage, and you're definitely going to want this at 21, as that's going to be the big defining moment when it boosts all the way up to extra spell deck, extra spell gain damage. And if you're like me and you weren't able to find a level 20 Spirit Gem, then don't forget you can always find a level 19 one, add an extra socket on it just in case you need the extra slot, and then hope that you'll get an extra level from the corruption. Then you'll be able to pop on Clarity, which is just amazing for giving you extra mana regeneration once more, and then Lightning Mastery, allowing you to boost it all the way up to level 21, which is what you're aiming for. Last but definitely not least, we're going to be using our Cast On Shock as our boss nuke, and this trigger effect is going to work absolutely ideal with Lightning Conduit. This hits ridiculously hard, and when it does, it's going to 1 or 2 shot pretty much everything when you've got the right setups going. Even with this budget build, as you saw earlier, it takes out pretty much everything in one hit, but even if it doesn't, because you're able to electrify things, you're going to have a few goes at trying to take them down anyway. For this, try to build up your crit and crit damage as much as possible. I think with the setup we've got, we're only at about 20% crit chance, so you can definitely build that up more, because we've got quite a few passive nodes in our skill tree that we've still got to pick up through leveling. For our support, you want Impetus, as this is going to give you 40% increased energy, allowing you to cast it a lot more often, and energy retention, because it's just going to help you to keep your mana up and allow you to cast it several times more than you would have without this. Over to our passive tree, and I've been running all of the tier 15s very easily on the rare, the toughest ones. Any modifiers hasn't really mattered much, and I still haven't even attempted the Chaos Trial in order to get my last 2 Ascendancy points. For your Ascendancy, the main ones you want to pick up 100% is going to be this wave right here, because it's going to help you pick up your maximum mana percentages, as well as Arcane Surge, which is amazing for giving you extra damage, more maximum mana, and finally Force of Will. Again, increasing your Arcane Surge, and works hand in hand with the other nodes we were picking up, which is going to be your Shock Chance, and this one just here, Strike Twice. And then for your last 2 when you pick them up, you've got the choice of going with Spell Critical Chance and Tempest Cooler just over here if you did want to trigger on that Elemental Storm, but the easier choice would probably be picking up Elemental Damage and then Scouring Winds. This is going to cause even more exposure, and it's just going to make everything fall over in front of yourself really easily. So personally, I'd probably pick these 2 if I wanted to clear maps faster. For our skill tree, you're going to want to make sure you take this path just here, picking up all of the damage nodes as you go, really boosting your damage. If you're missing anything for the gems you need to put in place, make sure you remember you can always put it in instead of your intelligence. Then we're going to pop over this way and make our way down to Mana's Blessing, as it's going to give us 5% increased maximum mana overall. Then heading off to the right, you're going to want to keep going down this way, because again you're going to be able to pick up a whole bunch of extra damage nodes, especially Echoing Thunder, which gives you 30% increased elemental damage if you've shocked an enemy recently, which is going to be up pretty much constant. Making our way up from here, you're going to want to branch off and go to the left, and this will be where you can put in your first jewel. Remember, pick damage, but you will need 2 of them that's going to have mana regained on defeated enemies. Up from here, you're going to want to make sure you pick up Lightning Quick and Drenched as well, as this is going to give you extra shock chance, extra damage, as well as extra cast speed. Going all the way down to the right, you're going to be able to put another jewel in this socket, and then these nodes just here are going to be ones you definitely need to pick up, as they're really going to enhance your critical damage. Like I said, we've still got a few bits to pick up because we're only at level 88, so you probably want to invest a few more into these nodes in order to boost your crit chance and crit damage. Anything I haven't covered here, I'll chuck in the planner, so don't worry, it'll be a full guide to 100. This is just to make it work at the moment, while allowing you to keep quite a high mana pool, enhancing your survivability. Going back to this node and making our way up, you're going to want Eldritch Battery, as this is what's going to be the big game changer for giving you a lot more extra damage all of your energy shield is going to be converted to mana. Then you're going to want arcane intensity, as it's going to give you 3% increased spell damage per 100 maximum mana as well. And then you're going to make your way all the way up to the top row, move along, and go all the way up until you hit pure power. 2% increased lightning damage per 10 intelligence. After that, make your way left once more, pick up your other socket, keep going all the way over to the other socket over on the other hand side, and then you want to make your way over to elemental penetration, storm charged, and then all natural. All of these are going to really help you to boost your elemental damage, as well as give you 5% all elemental resistances. Then another key one which you 100% will take is going to be mind over matter. This is going to mean all damage is taken from mana before life, which you've got one of, so that works out absolutely ideal. And then we're going to go back up to the top, make our way over to the right hand side, and you're going to pick up a little bit over here in order to give you extra spell damage as well as a little bit of extra projectile speed, which is why we didn't need to put it into one of our support gems. Over once more, and we're going to have another socket, and you're going to want to put Against the Darkness Time Lost Diamond in here, as it's going to give you a load of extra mana from that 1%, as this is the best place overall in order to pick it all up. Later on, you're probably going to pop down here, pick up these ones as well, as they're going to really help to give you a little bit of extra mana as well as a little bit of extra cast speed. But for the moment, we're going to pop down here, pick up all these nodes, which are going to give us some extra triggered spell damage, which is obviously going to be our lightning conduit, as well as the last one, energize, 25% chance for trigger skill to refund half of their energy spent. Anytime it says 3% of damage is extra fire, don't worry about that. That's just because I've got a cheaper Time Against Darkness duel. And of course, don't forget to pick up the capstone, Chaos Inoculation. If you don't pick this up, you're going to fall over constantly, and we don't need the life, because everything that hits us is going to take away from our mana. Being immune to chaos is just far too good to pass up. Once that's done, you're going to keep making your way down on the right hand side, pick up the other socket for your jewels, then move over here, pick up a bit of intelligence, as well as some more triggered spell damage. Dynamism is also a really nice one, as it gives you 40% increased damage if you triggered a skill recently, and your meta skills are going to gain 15% increased energy. For our last bit, you're going to jump just down here, giving yourself some more lightning damage, and a node that you should pick up on every lightning build, and that's going to be your Wild Storm. 15% more maximum lightning damage really boosts it up and gives you a whole lot more power when you're hitting enemies with all of your attacks. Like I said, if there's anything I've missed off, I'll chuck it in the planner for those last little 12 points, but ultimately most of them will go straight into your crit chance and crit damage to enhance all of the damage you'll be doing and taking down anything really easy. Right, hopefully I've not taken too long and that's helped you all out on a budget. There's going to be loads more content away from me, as well as a completely geared endgame stormeaver on the way that'll be almost invincible and can tackle every single bit of content very quickly, as well as making it fun whilst you do it. As well as that, there'll be some more tips on how to get currency and a whole bunch of other more videos, Path of Exile 2 on the way. As always, for all things gaming, take care. I'll see you on the next day.